My name is Curtis Arnold. I am the chief of the Sustaining Base Network Assurance Branch. However, as of last Friday, I am no longer with ARL. Army's reorganizing, going towards the Futures Command, and as part of that, we were moved over to CERDEC. So all the slides were there. I wanted to wear my ARL shirt, but you'll see a lot of things changing as far as our name here pretty soon. But good morning, everyone. So we're going to have some fun. We're going to go through what we're doing with the cloud, especially in CSSPs, Cybersecurity Service Providers. How many of you, show of hands, how many of you are aware of the CSSP program? All right, good amount of you. So at a high level, think of the Cybersecurity Service Provider as Cyber Command is at the top for the DoD. Underneath that, you have 23 what's known as Cybersecurity Service Providers, or CSSPs. And then underneath them is a tier 3, that's really the post-camp station, PM systems, things like that. Think of the tier 2 layer, there's 23 organizations, as they're the ones responsible for the day-to-day defensive cyber operations for all the tier 3 or post-camp stations, all right? So the 23 organizations provide 24/7 defensive cyber operation support to all of the field elements across the DoD. A lot of people ask, why is ARL, now CERDEC, doing this? And that's because we are focused on research. And we are kind of looked at as the flexible arm of how do you actually get after all of this stuff. And that's where we come to play, all right? So when the DoD started tackling cyber, we were interested. It's a hard problem. That's what we do. And so we started working with different components, different CSPs, Amazon, for example. Next slide. So I'm going to try to go through these fairly fast, just to leave time for questions. What I got this morning is there would be a lot of questions. Oh, I've got my own clicker. I should have known that, huh? My bad. So here's what we're going to talk about. Pretty straightforward. As I said, I'm going to try to get as much as I can time for open-ended questions. I think there'll probably be a lot, especially after this morning. All right? So what are we trying to do? We're trying to collaborate with the CSPs and the DoD CSSPs. I know it's hard, CSPs, but trust me, you'll get the hang of it here in a minute, all right? What we're trying to do is come up with the methods and technologies to actually bring all of the CSSPs together across all of the cloud service providers. We're trying to actually come up with that joint environment where they're all working together, regardless of which CSP is out there. And that way it's standardized across whoever's in the cloud. That's really at a high level what we're trying to do. Conduct research. Obviously, we want to do research on how best to do defensive cyber operations within the cloud, how to provide that situational awareness of what's happening so you know where to apply forces, funding, all that good stuff out there. A lot of people talk about, hey, I need to know what's out there first, and that's the true case for us. A lot of people have gone to the cloud already. We're trying to catch up. That's no secret. But the first thing is to get that situational awareness of where people are, and then to rethink traditional concepts to improve capabilities. So it's funny because ISCM, Information Security Continuous Monitoring, is a White House initiative that just came out a couple years ago down to the DoD. It's actually one of our fairly new capabilities. And with the cloud, we have to actually go through and rethink that already. So we were like, hey, we finally got ISCM and now we're rethinking it. ISCM is think of big data analytics and how do we use all that data to give us near real-time situational awareness. All right? So we just got that capability and we're already having to rethink it because of in the cloud. And we'll talk more about that later as far as big data analytics, but that's really what we're going after. Things operate differently in the cloud. There's still ways to do our mission. We just have to figure out the best, smartest way of doing that. Next slide. Oh, why the hell did I say that? Sorry. All right, it'll come to me, I promise. All right, so what we're looking at is looking at the ConOps. We've gone through to a scrub of all the requirements. We've been involved with the cloud SOGs, all that good stuff, ever since the first time they really started talking about it. If you go back to the very first slide decks on cloud, they're basically formatted on our slide deck that was transitioned into a discussion about the cloud. So we've been with it from the beginning. What are we trying to cover down? Infrastructure as a service, platform, software as a service, all that good stuff. We know we need to cover it all, and we need to cover it across a lot of people. So what does that mean with the impact levels? What are we going after? Endpoint security, obviously, vulnerability management, web assessments. So a lot of you might not know, but there's an order out there that says every Once a year, we have to come in and do an evaluation on ourselves from outside of the DoD. So we have to plan for that. How are we going to do that? What does it look like? Threat identification. We don't own part of the infrastructure. How do we look at all the threat, what's facing it? How do we see what the threat is doing? API calls and configurations. This is an interesting one because if you look at the way the DoD's historically done it, they've tried to keep their hands on all the metal. And that way they didn't have to do a lot of calls. All the metal was there. They just run a report or something. A lot of times what we're looking at now is you have to call across multiple instantiations, multiple platforms, multiple different solutions. And this is really going to become much more, as we look forward, we're going much more into frameworks. We need frameworks that are staying consistent that an analyst can go in and ingest no matter where the data is coming from. And so the only way we can tackle all the data available to us is through that process. All right? But with that, that breaks a lot of how we've done things in the past. So you'll hear us a lot more about, great, you've got a great tool, how do we ingest it? How do we get it into the big data platforms of the world? How does my BI system pull from it? Stuff like that. Excuse me. I almost said next slide. All right. So what are we trying to get after with the CSSP containers? So the way it works right now is we all are 23 different organizations. However, we all have the same mission. We get measured the same. We get measured next to each other, all that good stuff. When we looked at this as far as how are we going to tackle this across the community, we didn't want to each come up with our own solution, right? We wanted to see how could we do it jointly? How could we actually go through and tackle this problem? So what we're trying to do is actually come up with what we're calling a joint DCO, Defensive Cyber Operations, solution in the cloud, for the cloud, however you want to talk about it. But that joint part is the key concept. All 23 CSSPs are in on the discussions. They're having that conversation, so everyone in the DoD will be working and leveraging what we're doing and what we're going to talk about today, okay? That's important to put it out because we do have different components here, different components there. Those 23 CSSPs are going to be that central point for how we're going to defend. They're all talking to their CIOs. The CIOs are getting the same information we're pushing down. So we're trying to say dress right dress, all right? What we're trying to do is allow the CSSPs to focus on the mission. Some CSSPs, you take away time. This was an unfunded mandate. We don't want them to try to, again, solve the engineering aspect. Let them fall in on what's being engineered, and they can continue their mission. All right? The containers are going to be accessible, as I said, to everybody. And then we're going to go for the same data across all CSSPs. So there'll be a formalized thing. Right now, if you look at every CSSP kind of has deployed, they have some enterprise tools, but there's other things that they've deployed based off their mission. This will bring everybody back to everyone in the DoD talking about defensive cyber operations together across all cloud instantiations, all right? And that's a big one. Then we're talking apples to apples across every service, every mission, everything, all right? All right, so what are we going after? So if you look, and we have a slide coming up and talk about the actual containers. We're going to actually have what we call containers, or we'll have our own CSSP environments within each cloud. We don't want to bring in a lot of information. We don't want to bring down a lot of information to bring it back to our home site. We want to do it all in the cloud. So while we have that joint environment, each CSSP will have their own section. We'll talk later about the portal that we're going to use to help align everybody. But the core piece is you come in as a customer. You say, hey, I'm going to align to this CSSP. If you're a Navy, you align to the Navy CSSP. If you fall under ARL, or SERDEC now, sorry, old habit. Then you fall into us. And that'll automatically align you to that subsection of what we call the container environment. And that will automatically associate you with all the HBSS, ACAS, whatever else is out there. And again, we'll talk more about that when we talk about rethinking some of the tools and capabilities. All right. It's important to understand that in order for us to keep all the data consistent, we will control all of that infrastructure. The sites, the mission partners, all that will not control the ACAS scanners, will not control the endpoint security solution, any of that. That'll all be done by the CSSP. All right? And then the data will be isolated for every CSSP. Pretty self-explanatory. We will have some site-to-site VPNs, depending on the configuration and what you're going after. That will help to make sure that we get in and everything's secure from our container to yours. All right. All right, so at a minimum, this is what we're going for. This is for considered IOC. All right, so at IOC, which is later on this fiscal year, excuse me, we're going to have vulnerability scanning, endpoint security, and log collection available for every of the CSSPs. And that will be established for, we're going after a core group of CSPs first, and that will be established for every CSSP. So cloud service providers, we're doing focus on once. I'm spelling it out because I know that gets confusing with the CSP and CSSP, right? And then all the CSSPs will fall in on those cloud service providers. So we meet every 6 months. We've been working on what's the requirements, what do we need as a CSSP organization for a while. This was agreed upon as far as IOC by all of the CSSPs. So they're all tracking the same thing. You'll end up all seeing the same thing. So when you look at what we're trying to do, this is just an example. Oh, see, someone. All right. I promise I didn't click that one. All right. So when you look at infrastructure as service, so everyone pretty much should be, or I hope is tracking the difference between infrastructure, platform, and then software as a service, right? There is a difference on what data we can and cannot use. Flat out, that's the truth. You will not get everything that you're used to seeing from a software as a service solution. You just don't. We are not going to be scanning all the OSs, all that good stuff. Infrastructure as a service is very much like you're taking your enclave now, you're just hosting it somewhere else. All right, so you'll still have Nessus, HBSS, all the enterprise things that are available to you. We are looking, and you'll see the endpoint security solution, we are looking at what's really the best answer. I'll be the first one to tell you that most of the CSPs, the cloud service providers, have better tools and capabilities than we do right now in endpoint security. We're relying on HBSS. HBSS is a good product, but it's been out there for a little while. We're working on updating that. And if you look at some of the information they are getting, it's actually pretty good. So what's the answer there? Did it switch on its own again? All right. Platform as a service. So instead of getting vulnerability scanning and stuff like that, you'd get your API calls. You'd get your flow information, and then software as a service would rely heavily on logs. Logs, you'll see, is going to be a very big push, not only within the cloud, but it's going to be a big push across all of the enclaves, traditional enclaves, coming forward in the future. So regardless if you're in cloud or not, logs, you're going to see a lot of. All right, so what's infrastructure as a service? So the scan data, basically you'll have a virtual instance within your environment. That's something that you have to work out. We work with you, but that falls under your container. We give you a thing, and then you can stand it up. All right. The HBSS agent, same thing. We'll be able to install agents depending on the size and be able to bring it back to our EPOS. Network flows, each one of the CSPs have the ability of giving us the network flows. It's not like we're going to hook up a IDS at the physical entry point. That doesn't work that way. So you're going to see a lot of things coming to the wall. And the API logs. You're going to see a lot going with the API logs. So this optional thing here is the system logs and application logs. That's optional now. I can tell you it will not be optional in the future. All right. So when you look at platform as a service, you can see that we only have certain things. On the left, I'm sorry, on your right, you'll see the applications and data. So how are we going to get after this? Again, API logs, application logs. That's kind of flipped from the infrastructure, right? The net flows, system logs, vulnerability scanning, we're going to get what we can. So there are some things that we can do. For example, if you're doing platform as a service and running some databases and stuff, we can run stuff against those databases, but you won't get the host information. And so it's very limited. But at the same time, we'll be able to get the data points that we need. Pretty self-explanatory. And then the next one, software as a service. It's going to be almost entirely based off of the logs, API calls, all that good stuff. We want to see who's communicating with it, who's doing what with it, what are they sending. You can get a lot from the logs, and that's what we're going to be leveraging. All right. Considerations. Which functions can be performed at 4 and 5? That's an important one. Everything's a little different, right? Each service capabilities is different from every CSP. If you look and talk to every cloud service provider, each one's got their own language, each one's got their own thing, right? So, there's a different lexicon, there's a different data set, there's a different capability, but a lot of them are going after the same things. They all have some type of endpoint security information. They all have some information that talks about the vulnerabilities they're dealing with. And so you have to go through and normalize across all those cloud service providers. I don't remember how many have provisional authorities right now, but I think it's darn near 200, right? And so you have to worry about, okay, how am I actually going to scale and normalize across a bunch of different groups, right? And need to map commercial CSP capabilities that can be leveraged by the CSSPs. So right now, again, this goes into everyone's got different capabilities. We have to map those back. And we have to keep up with the CSSP, the cloud service providers, to keep on top of what they're doing, what's the roadmap, all that good stuff. That is currently not in place. That is something the DoD's been working on. We're making traction. Amazon's been doing a great job of working with us. And we can see, okay, you've got this coming. That will actually help to fill a void that we might spend millions of dollars on the other side. However, you already have it in your roadmap. Let's leverage that. That's like the 80% solution. That's great. Let's go. All right. All right, the containers. How are we going to do the logs? All logs are going to be around for 30 days, right? The raw logs. So you can get the raw information. You can go through it. You can throw it into a seam. Pretty self-explanatory. All right. And I do believe all these slides will be made available on the website. That's correct, right? Yep. He said yes. So you'll be able to see all of this here and go through it in more detail. I'm not going to go by line. We do use Elasticsearch. We have several solutions. Like I said, we use big data capabilities that the DoDs have developed. We use Elasticsearch. We use Tableau. We use a lot of different things. In this case, it'll be Elasticsearch. So how's the data ingest going to happen? So you have it all coming back to Amazon Kinesis. For this cloud service provider, right? But it's going to be fairly straightforward as far as everyone's used to bringing back information, ingesting it. There's nothing incredibly earth-shattering about what we're doing with this component. And I'm sorry, if I didn't tell you, I am the eye candy, right? Carlos here, and by all means I'm throwing him under the bus, is the engineer, all right? So at the end of the thing, you want to talk eye candy? Engineer? All right, we all getting this? All right. Did I miss anything on this one?
No, you're good.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the mission owner platform. And remember, please, I'm trying to get us through this because a lot of people had a lot of questions. All right. All right, so we can come up with these cloud service solutions. We can do all this stuff. We have some analytics now that have just started running. I told you a lot of people went to the cloud and we didn't know about it as far as the clouds, the CSSPs. So we have analytics that are running just looking for people that are logging in to cloud management stuff, just so we can get an idea who's out there, capture them, bring them into alignment, all that good stuff. However, we can get all these containers, but if we don't know who's there, who's going into the cloud, it's going to be hard on us aligning people. It's kind of like anybody. It's not like a traditional within the DoD where you have to go through DISA or someone else to get a circuit. You can go to anybody and get something in the cloud. So we have to have a way of tracking that. One of the things we're doing is working with all of the cloud service providers to identify and get into a contract where they have to align new customers automatically to the DoD. And this joint environment will be that central place where everybody comes into a line. So every time they have a new DoD customer, wherever they are, we don't have to know about it right away until they actually sign that contract and actually get access. Then dynamically everything will be aligned to us. The way we're doing that is through this customer container, right, portal. So that central place for information about the mission owners, who's out there, what are they doing, where we can dynamically put how many VMs they have, how many whatever they have. That's what we're going after. If there's an incident, we need to be able to know who it is, who we can go after. That's all things we've done historically. We all have databases somewhere where we're filling in, populating information of my POCs for all my sites. I have over 500 sites around the world. I need to be able to know, I can't memorize them, so I need to be able to find them real quick if there's an incident. Automatic configuration of data sources. We can't have an engineer every time someone comes in the cloud to actually touch every container. So that automated alignment is a key point of that process. We want everything where it pops up as soon as it's aligned to the container, it pops up for an analyst to see. We don't want it to take on forever. And then retrieve information. Obviously, we just talked about this. How do you actually know what's out there? And this is a key point. And a lot of times it comes down to communications between the defenders and the mission owners, right? What's going on? Is this acceptable? Do you have a lower level of risk? That type of thing. Excuse me. All right, so that data repository, that's the key point. We want to bring in the information. So it all comes back to a central database, and we can actually pull it from there. We actually have this up and running for the most part for our thing. We call it the CSSP Service Manager. That's how we track who's coming in, get what services, and where they're at in the alignment process. You'll hear me talk about alignment. That basically is the DoD's term. Did I switch again?
Yep.
Hi. All right. So alignment's the DoD's term for how do you actually get assigned and covered by a CSSP. So when they talk about anyone who, cybersecurity service provider, CSSP, that's service provider. So they talk about subscribers. Those are people that subscribe to that CSSP and receive defensive cyber operations from that CSSP. Once you actually are getting all of your defensive operations, I saw that move, then you're considered online, right? And so you hear us talk about that. But this is fairly straightforward. It's a database where you're going to be able to get in the information and be able to communicate back and forth. All right, it obviously wants to go to the next slide. I'm going to have to see if someone put animations or something in here. All right, the workflow, how is it going to work? Pretty self-explanatory. The mission owner is going to be filling out a lot of information. Obviously, whenever you go to get one of these containers or environments, you've got to identify who you are, what you're doing, how you're paying for it, all that good stuff. Once that's captured, it'll be added, with the cloud service provider with their information. Where is it going to be? What kind of instantiation is it? Where is it at? Excuse me. And then that will be put over to the CSSP. You'll be aligned there, and then that'll give you a portal to be able to access, all right, who's my CSSP contacts? Where do I get information from? All that good stuff. Then you'll be added to the mail list, different components later on in life, all right? And that's where the addition, did it move again? I'm blaming my engineer. If anyone would like to talk to him about PowerPoint after this, you feel free. All right, and then the additional instructions. The additional instructions will be something where any CSSP can identify, all right, here's what I need you to do now. And this will change over time. Hey, we've got a problem, here's what you've got to do. Pretty self-explanatory. I think it should be pretty easy for everybody. The registration workflow. Receive the information, verify the status as a customer. So this is important because I can tell you the DoD is just like everybody else. If you say you have to go and link up with that office, but it's going to take you 2 weeks, a lot of people would be like, hey, I hooked up with that office, but they never contacted them, right? So one of the processes is checks and balances or verification. So we want to say, make sure that when we say you're aligned and you're getting defensive cyber operations from them, they know you're getting defensive cyber operations and you're there, all right? I know it seems funny, but it's a true story. Initiate CSSP services. This is basically saying, all right, I have everything in line. I have everything ready to go. And then the data in step 3, and the cloud service provider is automatically enabled for you. Again, this is all hopefully will eventually be automated. So you'll be able to say, okay, I've got a notification that I have a new cloud server, or I have a new customer that's aligned to me. We'll go in, say, yep, I can see their stuff, I can see their container, and I'm getting the data from the CSP. If not, we go back to the mission owner and say, hey, there's something wrong with the way you're working this. You need to work with the CSP to get it done, and you can't do your mission until it's aligned. All right. All right, so what's the implementation plan? The 4 phases. Phase 1 is just getting the owner registration portal up. We do have a dump from a lot of the primary cloud service providers of who is where, who's their customers, where are they at, all that good stuff. But that's ever changing. As soon as we received it, it was old. All right? So just getting that mission registration portal open. When that happens, we will try to work with the cloud service providers to actually get another dump and try to auto-populate some of that where we can. If not, you're going to end up seeing an order coming out from the DoD that says, hey, if you have anything in the cloud, you have to go here. At the same time, we're going to be working with all the cloud service providers to notify everybody, to notify all their customers that, hey, this is a new process, you need to go do this. All right? We are going to have contract language and stuff in place with the cloud service providers. They will eventually, if you don't listen, will be asked to take action concerning your account. All right? Just understand there's a draft message going out about repercussions for not following the alignment process. The DoD is getting serious. They need to get their hands around this, and you're going to see a big push for making that happen. All right? The next one is API implementation. So we want to make sure that we can get the right information. The team's already, obviously, a lot of these are being worked concurrently. The APIs take longer than just getting a registration portal up and running. But those APIs are a core requirement. Work with the cloud service providers for the automated feeds. We want to make this as seamless for the mission owners as we can. The mission owners don't do cyber. They're out there trying to do something, solve something. They shouldn't have to worry about this a whole lot. And we're trying to make that as least impactful as possible. All right? And then the reporting interface. This comes important because, you know, I told you about a lot of the tools that the cloud service providers are using, right? They have good stuff. They have good people. Amazon's worked with us quite a few times. We've had a lot of stuff going on. There will be times when they see something that we don't see. They can see different levels in the environment. They can see different approaches. They can see things going across all of the enterprise. So we need to have a way for them to interface with us. And so you'll see that along the way, all right? So there might be a case where we say, hey, something's going on, but we got it from the CSP, the cloud service provider. Well, you'll be like, I've got a contract with them. Why didn't they tell us? That's because of the relationship with us, and it came from us, the CSSP level. All right. I'm almost done. I think there's like one slide after this. All right. So here's what we're kind of offering right now. This is what we're going after as far as those containers in the cloud. When you look at AWS and what we'll be able to offer, this gives you a good idea. This is pretty self-explanatory. You can see on the left side, yes, your left, what the offerings are, availability, infocon, vulnerability scanning, all that good stuff. So when you think about this, this aligns exactly to what you're used to seeing from defense within the DoD. However, on the back end, how it's being performed may be different because of a cloud service provider has another option, another capability, those type of things. All right? So it's going to be, we're trying to make it as consistent as possible so you can talk oranges and oranges and apples to apples, right? But on the back end, when you actually see some of the data, if you see the data, then it'll be a little different. I think it's pretty explanatory. Anyone that's done anything in the DoD pretty much has had to run into this. A lot of the mission owners, I know HBSS, enterprise feeds, infocon, all that good stuff, should be pretty straightforward. If you have any questions on what some of this services mean, because you're not used to seeing the DoD, by all means, let us know. Oh, see, too easy. All right, with that, again, Curtis Arnold, my engineer here, Carlos. We can talk about anything you kind of want to talk, but with that, we wanted to get through it, open it up for questions. At this point, there are some hot mics that can walk around, but are there any questions, comments, concerns, death threats? No? Yes. He's coming over.
Thanks. I had a couple of questions. One was, what do you see how do you see this impacting the roles of the existing SOCs in the department?
The existing CSSPs in them?
No, not CSSPs, the security operations centers and their role in DCO as well.
So the current DCO structure will stay in place.
Okay.
They've already kind of existing relationships and processes. So I don't see them being
Impacted.
in fact much, unless they are, some units have created their own SOCs that are kind of isolated, just because they wanted to stand up something too.
Yeah.
Unless they're tied in with the enterprise, they won't get the benefits of a lot of this.
So related to that, feeds from the knowledge base that you're building in your big data environment to like the cybersecurity scorecard and other kinds of elements. Can you talk about that in some way?
Yeah. So currently, a lot of our stuff already feeds those elements. That stuff will stay in place. So we're used to automatically feeding in for the scorecard. We're used to rolling up to CMRS. For those in the DoD or not in the DoD, it's a lot of how we actually report up to Congress on stuff. We have certain paths that we go through. We're used to that already, and that will be built into the process. So a lot of the things you see, there's no way I'm going to cut off the DoD and not let them see anything up to Congress, right? That'd be bad. So we'll keep those things going. All right. Yes. Oh.
Thank you. You briefly touched on, Tariq Alizad with AT&T, briefly touched on SIEM systems. Do you have multiple SIEM systems, and are they on-prem under your control, or do you use SIEM systems from cloud service providers as well?
Yes to all of that. So across the DoD, the CSSP level, there's multiple SIEMs in place.
Okay, and do you aggregate them? Do you aggregate the data, or how do you do that?
There are certain elements that we're allowed, and remember, I got to keep this public forum.
Yeah.
There are certain elements that we roll up to other people,
Okay.
roll up to Cyber Command, JFQ Doden, stuff like that. And there's certain data that we leave at the service CSSP level, right?
Okay.
The way that some people are doing it in the cloud is they are standing up SIEMs in the cloud, and that will be part of that container. So we're going for an IOC for enterprise capability. Then some of the other CSS people add whatever they're used to adding, right? And so some of them will stand up SIEMs within the cloud to take in the data. One of the things we're trying to do really hard is to keep all the data there. All right, so we don't want them bringing it back. You'll see probably for the next probably 2 years, you'll probably see CSSPs that are bringing data back to what their historical SIEM has been. But
Okay.
eventually you'll see more stuff actually being performed and maneuvering and operating within the cloud.
Yeah, what I was getting at the lowest level, do you have a common data structure and common database across all your SIEMs? Because that would matter, I suppose, at some point for you to have a common structure across it, right?
That'd be great.
Yeah, but right now it seems disparate, but
Yeah,
eventually, yeah.
So there are initiatives. We have things. It started a lot with the big data platform on ways to centralize and normalize what data is coming in from where. That way everyone's talking about the same data structure.
Yeah, and you're
it has
threatening-
not been expanded to everything yet.
Yeah, makes sense.
But eventually it will be.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble if you use the microphone.
How are you aligning your processes with moving to the cloud with the DHS's CDM program and their processes?
So as far as moving to the cloud for the CSSP, it's there. We talk to the DHS. We talk to the CERT all the time. There's not going to be much there. When you're talking about big federal policy on how you move applications and stuff to the cloud, they meet all the time. I was talking to the DoD CIO yesterday, and they just got out of a meeting with DHS about the cloud. So there's coordination there. From my level with the CSSPs, there's some things that need to be linked, but it's not a tremendous amount because a lot of those instantiations are already there as far as relationships. And they won't change just because we're talking about the cloud compared to another enclave. A lot of it's not technical. A lot of it's processes, policies, reporting up, stuff like that won't change. Did that answer your question? All right. If not, let me know. Oh, you got two there.
What's the timeline for the container and all this registration stuff?
So we're trying for IOC the end of this FY. That's what we're shooting for. So in a couple months. For the CSSPs, we'll have a couple that will initially come in. Not all of them are going to come in at one time, but eventually we'll have basically probably 5 to 10 CSSPs in towards the end of the FY. Did you have a question?
Hi. How are you integrating PKI and CAT cards for cloud services?
Engineering question. I love it. Huh?
So that's, as a CSSP, it's not necessarily something that we're just following what DoD is doing. So that's not an issue that we're tackling ourselves. We're just following standard DoD policies.
So with that, I'm making sure you understand what he's saying. So the mission owners, the CIOs, all fall under the mission owners. And so the CIOs are responsible for deploying the PKI solutions. And then from there, and we're working with multiple thin client, zero client, different kind of access points. But then whatever the Army, because we are Army, says, hey, this is what you're going to use across the department, that's what we'll use.
Hi, I'm Karen from CCOM. I had two questions. The first one is, what costs are involved in getting involved with the process?
Okay.
And do you have a documented process in terms of initial access?
Did you say you're from CCOM? Now I'm CERTAC. We'll be in the same building, basically, right? All right. So we do, when you talk about the cost, there's two different separate costs that we're talking about. One is for just the cloud container and how are you going to get covered by a CSSP. The other cost is actually for the CSSP services. So a lot of the when you talk about AF Cyber, our cyber, some of them are mission funded. That doesn't mean they were mission funded for the cloud. A lot of what you're talking about with the cloud is reimbursable. So when you're talking about the containers and how you're going to align what we're talking about here, what we're doing is working with the cloud service providers to say, okay, that's going to be this much processing time that you're going to have to add in on your contract. That's just the easiest, fastest way to get it done. You're paying for your fraction of what it will take for the environment. Then on the back end, depending on, again, your CSSP, it will depend on if there's a cost for paying for that CSSP service on the back end, if it's reimbursable or not. My organization, for example, is reimbursable. So if you come to me, I'm going to be like, and once a year we post a price chart that says if you're small, medium, large, here's your cost for the year. It's a flat fee. Have a good day. Those are really those two types of costs. They are out there. We have a website, cndsp.arl.army.mil. If you'd like to look at that, and they'll have more information on it. Again, cndsp.arl.army.mil. Yes?
Are you working with MilCloud at all with the CSSPs?
Yes. So we all work well together. We all know each other. Again, we all get together every 6 months. We work heavily in the MilCloud. We were just on a telecon with Rob and others from MilCloud the other day. So MilCloud's a little different. It was built by the military, MilCloud. And it's configured a little different, and it's a little harder for other CSSPs outside of DISA to operate within. However, we're working on some changes to make it easier. We do already have subscribers that are on and in the MilCloud that we are covering down on. And you'll see more CSSPs do that along the way. All right? Documented process for so on the website, you'll see information about the process. So basically, all the CSSPs are evaluated. They're called it's called the ESM, Evaluated Scoring Metrics. That's on IASE, the Information Assurance Support Environment, .disa.mil. That's how you can look and see across the board, how do we align new people? What's the process for aligning? And that's how we get measured. And then for each CSSP, you'll find a website like mine is cndsp.arl.army.mil that talks about that individual CSSP's process for aligning people. All right? So if you want big standard, that's at IASE. If you want individual, go to that CSSP and you'll get that process. Okay? Any other questions? You got another? Oh, you're getting me in trouble again. Didn't we talk about this just a second ago? They're recording, so we got to get on the microphone. We have 10 minutes left, so if you have any questions, let us know.
With the DoD still kind of struggling getting out of DIACAP and moving to RMF, what are you guys doing to accelerate that, or how is that hindering you guys?
So we've used big data and some other analytics to actually go through and develop near real-time risk pictures. We are executing a pilot this FY. We're going to use Huntsville, Alabama as the pilot site to actually go after continuous reauthorization. We're that close to being able to execute it using some of our capabilities. So we're going to be running a pilot there. RMF can be a lengthy process, so what we're trying to do is get people to be able to come into buckets. Once they're in those buckets, we'll have basically some type of standard deviations that they're allowed to operate within, and then continuously monitor them with those standard deviations. And as they fall out of compliance, then we'll decide, hey, what's wrong? Do we need to send people? Do they need to get visited by a CPT, a CCRI, those type of things. But the answer really going forward is big data, continuous monitoring all the time, and get used to more operating instead of the 6-shop, the 3-shop, and dealing with risks there. That answer your question? All right, anybody else? All kinds of questions could be made. No? All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good day.